Hello and welcome to Sharing Jewish Wisdom.
Hello and welcome back to Sharing Jewish Wisdom. Now, in last week's video we had that fantastic presentation on the mezuzah, and I've left a link in the description below. And this week we've come to the end of Bereshit, so we're up to the sedrah of Vayechi, and I'm pleased to say that Reb Shlomo is back with us and he's going to talk to us today about the sedrah.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, nice to be back. Hope you're all well and looking forward to a healthy, successful and happy 2024, which you can enhance by watching our presentations, adding some I likes and subscribing if you haven't already done so.
Amen.
That's the plug for Sharing Jewish Wisdom. Okay, yes, as you say, incredibly, having started at Bereshit, we've now zipped through the whole of that sefer, and we're at the end, and the sedrah this week is Vayechi. Now, Vayechi, what does it mean? Vayechi means, and he lived. So who is the he? That sounds good, particularly if you understand Hebrew. Who is the he? And we were referring to Yaakov Avinu, our patriarch, Jacob. And the sedrah essentially tells us about the last part of his life. Now, here's something I saw which I thought was rather clever. Jacob lived to be 147. Not a bad run, and I'm quite sure that the pension he collected over all those years was well worth having. Please God by us. So, what does this Vayechi mean? And he lived. Surely he lived 147 years. But our commentaries say no. The best years of his life were the first 17 years of the life of Joseph before he was kidnapped by his brothers and sold on into Egypt. And the last 17 years of Jacob's life, which he spent in Egypt after he was sent for by Joseph as viceroy. That's two 17s. Keep that in your mind. The word Vayechi is written Vov, Yud, Ches, Yud. We'll look at the numerical value. Vov is 6, Yud is 10, that's 16, Ches is 8, is 24, and another 10 with the last Yud is 34. Two 17s are 34. You're ahead of me. Very good. Yes, and that is the real meaning of Vayechi. And the way it's written in the Sefer Torah is also unusual because normally a sedrah breaks from the previous paragraph and starts at a new paragraph. Vayechi is unique. It's the only one that starts in the middle of a paragraph of writing. There you go.
Didn't know that.
Right. Well, there we are. You're not a Balkore. I was, so that's how I know these things. Okay, so what's the real focus of what happens in the sedrah this week, involving Jacob and Joseph and the brothers and so on? It really reaches out to us to show us the strength of the family unit. Every culture has its positives and negatives. One of our big cultural positives is the bond of the family. In some places you find the grandparents, if you like, pushed into a corner and ignored. With us, Baba and Zayda have a lifetime of valued experience and opinions that are worth contributing to any situation. So that's the situation. Now, where does the sedrah start? Well, we find first of all, that Jacob becomes ill. Now, this is unusual. He was the first person in the Torah to have an illness recorded. Before that, how did people come to the end of their lives? Well, it tells us at the beginning of Bereshit that the Almighty blew the breath of life into Adam Rishon, into Adam. And what happened was that people would sneeze, blowing out the breath of life, and that was it. They never knew when it was going to happen. Jacob, however, was blessed in a way that he knew the end was coming and he became ill. So we are told in the Talmud in Bava Metzia 87a, for anybody who wants to go away and check it all out, that was the case. And of course his son Joseph came to visit him. Now why is that significant? Well, it's significant, as we're told in the Talmudical tractate Nedorim 39b, that if you go and visit someone who is unwell, you actually take away 1/60 of their ill health. Not necessarily to take that upon yourself so that you become unwell, but rather that you relieve them of that element of their discomfort. So we see that Joseph didn't go, as it were, alone. He went with his sons Manasseh and Ephraim. And coming back to our point about the significance of the family, Jacob gave both his grandsons a blessing. Now, that whole episode is worth a presentation in itself, for which unfortunately we haven't got time for. But if people want to go away and look at that and read the commentary and see how Jacob elevated one grandson over the other, fascinating stuff. At first it looks like, well, he doesn't agree with his son Joseph about their status, but it all has a deep significance for the future. Okay, and then the sons of Jacob come for the end of their father's life, and he blesses all of them. But he doesn't just give them a blessing. He gives each one of them a role to play in the future, because each one of them is the head of one of the famous 12 tribes. They are given not only something, as it were, to do, but it's also indicative of the future welfare of that tribe and its significance in Jewish history. Those blessings are again well worth looking at. And it's also very interesting to compare and contrast. Remember those school exam questions, compare and contrast? To compare and contrast with what Moshe Rabbeinu, what Moses says before he passes away when he addresses the people. So if you want to zip ahead to the end of Deuteronomy, you can look at that and make your comparisons. All right, and then, of course, poor Jacob passes away, and there is a funeral procession. Now, that in itself is well worth reading about, because it wasn't just putting him in a coffin and running him up the road to the local cemetery. He was, of course, taken out of Egypt back to what they then called Canaan, what we call Eretz Israel. And it is a fascinating journey, because they get to a point where they leave Egypt and come into Canaan, if you like, the border. And that place is known as Goin Ha'otad, the threshing floor of Otad. Why is it so significant? Because it says, Vayas Eva La'oviv Shivas Yomim, that at that point the sons performed the ritual mourning for their father for 7 days. And that is the origin of the custom of observing Shiva. That's where it comes from. There's always a reason, there's always a background and an explanation. And that is where it all started. Now, I've spoken about the family, and just to bring together the last part, after Jacob's passing, and in view of what had gone on before with Joseph, some of the brothers were a little bit concerned that Joseph would then seek to take his revenge. His father had gone. There was no reason why he shouldn't get his own back after what they did to him, selling him, and so on and so forth. And of course, he had become the viceroy of Egypt. He was, if you like, second in command. And Pharaoh had left so much in his hands that he was almost running the country on his own. But Joseph called his brothers and told them, no, that's not what he's going to do. He's not going to slight them or do anything bad to them, far from it. And he asked them to do one thing for him. Please don't bury me in Egypt. When you leave, take me with you. So when he passed away at the age of 110, they put him in a coffin. And what did they do with it? There were no fridges. There was no mortuary. They dropped the coffin into the Nile.
Wow.
And there he laid at the bottom of the water, duly preserved. And he lay there until the Bnei Israel were released from bondage at the time of the Exodus. And the story goes that Moshe Rabbeinu walked up and down by the Nile calling Yosef, and the coffin came up and they took him back to Canaan.
Wow. How long after the event, after he passed away, did this happen?
That's a good question. Ooh, I wasn't expecting that one. That's got to be quite a long time. Because at the very start of the next sedrah, at the start of Shemos, it tells us that Vayechi melech chodesh al Mitzrayim asher lo yodai es Yosef, that a new king arose who did not know Joseph. There are various interpretations as to what that actually means. Was it a new king who hadn't met Joseph, or was it the same king who changed his policies and didn't want to know all that Joseph had done to save the country during the famine? But there must have been a period of time after Joseph passed away until this new king came. And then there was, of course, the slavery itself, which didn't start until the last of Joseph's brothers died, that was Levi. The slavery itself was something around 80 years, as I understand it. So we're probably looking at a couple of 100 years, perhaps something like that. So I can't resist the opportunity to say it's obviously not the cough that carries you off, it's the coffin they carry you off in. Yes, I know. For those who find that either silly or ironic or unhumorous, there you are. You get what you pay for. And that is where we come to the end of Bereshit and say, Chazak, Chazak, and is Chazak. Let's hope that we have the strength to go forward into Shemos, and that we've learned an awful lot in the past few weeks.
Amen. Well, I'm sure that everyone would like to thank Reb Shlomo for his presentations throughout the sedrah of Bereshit. It's been an inspiration. Now, we haven't finished, because next week we've got a great presentation on the Shabbat candles.
Indeed, we're going to do another one of our workshops. You'll remember that we did the Hanukkah workshop, which you all seem to like. Thank you for looking at that. We recently did the mezuzah workshop. We were really nailing our colours to the mast there. Okay. And we've decided we're going to do a candle lighting workshop. Now you may say, well, what is it? You strike the match, put it to the wick, and off you go. Well, there's a bit more to it than that. And we'd really like, this is really for the ladies. So if you happen to be a man with a mother around, or a wife around, or daughters around, or anybody else come to that, please bring them in to watch this, because we're going to look at history, rationale, explanation, and we're hoping that it will make a real difference to your understanding of what we do and why we do it.
Fantastic. Good. Well, I'm sure we'll look forward to that. And we've put a link in the description for our presentation on the mezuzah. And we look forward to welcoming back Reb Shlomo next week on our presentation for the Shabbat candles.
Thanks very much, everybody. Have a good Shabbos.
Take care. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please click the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel for some great content.